Hello there. On today's show, we're going to be talking about what can go wrong with your Spain visa application and what to do if this nightmare becomes a reality. I'll be joined shortly on the virtual settee beside the virtual pool by our best mate and residency specialist, Chris from Upsticks.es, who will be answering all of your questions so you can get all of the answers you need. Make sure you stay with us to the end of the show because we have a special announcement about next week's thrilling show, and it's got something to do with this. I'll be showing you around the studio and telling you what next week is all about. We'll get back to that in a minute. Until then, gather around, give us a wave, hit the like button, have your questions ready, or just get ready to enjoy the chat. It's time for our small but perfectly formed theme tune. Here it comes. Let's dance. Groovy, baby. So just before I bring in Chris, don't forget to make a note of our website, YouTooSpain.com. It's on the screen just there somewhere. You can find loads of resources, specialists and links that you need for your move to Spain and for living here. There's a free newsletter at the beginning of every month, so the July one's coming up in a week's time. Sign up for that. It's free, doesn't cost you a penny. And if you use the partner links, it helps YouTooSpain without costing you a cent. It's a win-win-win. Oh, hang on, we need a graphic for that. It's a win-win-win with a cherry on top. There it goes. Get ready on the chat then. You can get all of these catchphrases and everything on our merchandise, by the way. There's a merchandise page link in the video description below. And if you want different colours or different merchandise or designs, give me a shout and I'll set that up and sort it out. So without further ado, let's meet our guest for today. It's Chris from Upsticks. Hola, Chris.
Hola, good morning. How you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. And you?
Yep, very well. Nice and warm now, isn't it?
Oh, it's lovely. Yes, I think we've had the rain and we've had the storms. Yeah, we had a few storms this week. They were quite spectacular.
Yeah. It's I think we're here. Summer's to stay.
Yes, absolutely. Now, usually we have questions from Facebook and other social media about halfway through the show, but because today's topic is basically one big question, that's what everybody wants to know. What can go wrong and what can you do about it? So we'll get straight on with that after. Well, let's see who's on the live chat and say hello. Have you got anybody to say hello to?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, so we've got a lovely family, the Fajardo family, who sounds Spanish. We've got British passports, with Spanish heritage there, but coming on a non-lucrative visa, and they're here with their visas now. But it's quite apt that we're talking about them because actually, the lady who's from the family, we went to do her what they call the toma de huella. So when you give your fingerprints to register the visa, and one of the things that can go wrong is if the consulate issue a perfectly good visa, but then they don't properly update it in immigration. So in this instance, there was an NIE number registered with a maiden name. We've updated all the documents, presented the marriage certificate, etc., etc. The visa's been issued, gone to the police. The police have said, still got your maiden name on the registration.
Oh, no.
So it's not a problem because what you have to do is then communicate that with immigration because the police offices can't deal with it because it's just computer says no, they can't adjust names, only addresses. And it adds an extra 2 weeks to the process. But anyway, I'd like to say hello to them, and that's just one of the things that can go wrong.
Brilliant. So on the live chat this morning, we have Andy Cooper, Andy D, and Bev. They're the ones who've said hello so far. Hello to everybody else. Give us a wave on the live chat and tell us where you are and what you're doing. And so let's get on with a little bit of updating to start with. Any news from the embassies this week?
Yeah, so now Edinburgh and London are up and running in the BLS offices now. We've had a couple go through Edinburgh, which seem to have gone well, apart from one where they seem to lose a document, which is quite concerning. So, and they sent a requirement letter to a client, and we know that they took the document and handed it in. Then on investigation, we asked them to look in the opposing file. So each application you make is prepared separately. Albeit you might have joint assets, you're still making essentially two separate applications. And we asked them to look in the other application file, and they found the document they were looking for. So somehow what they'd done, albeit our clients had prepared a copy correctly of each document, is they've managed to stick the same document in the same file twice. So, you know, there's those kind of things are really out of your control, but it's just to be aware that if you do get a requirement letter and you think I've already handed that in, you know, the first thing to do, maybe go back to them and say, well, can you check my husband's or wife's or partner's file, because it might just have been shoved in there. Same Manchester at the moment are they're not at the BLS office. I did see on Facebook somebody announcing that they were going to be moving to it, but so far our appointments have been going through Manchester, and we're waiting for appointment confirmations to come through, so we'll find out if they're going to change their office. Again, Manchester this week lost a notarized document which we found in an opposing file. And London seems to be working well in their new BLS office, and yeah, fine. Apparently I haven't been yet, but I'm hoping to get in summer to do a bit of a recce. But apparently when you first arrive in London, it's almost in the BLS office, it's almost like you don't actually know you're there. It's just quite a big building and doesn't really look like it's apt for visa applications. So if anybody's going, just you know, check, make sure you're in the right place, but don't be too scared if it doesn't look like the right place.
Yes, of course. But actually, tell us a bit more about BLS, because it's something that's very new to me, and it's very new to everybody else as well. They farmed out getting visas. Is that right?
Basically, yeah. So BLS handle many visa applications, including tourist applications for other countries, and now they're handling the non-lucratives for both London and Edinburgh. So basically, it's farmed out now. What we hope, there is a smaller fee. You have to pay an extra fee to them. I think it's about £12 extra on top of the actual visa itself and the application. So, you know, what we hope though is, and so far what we've seen for July is an awful lot more appointments. Last year we saw after mid-July till beginning of September a bit of a pain to get appointments at the consulate. We know the consulate's a smaller place, you know, they've only got a limited capacity, and we know they struggled with the students. Whereas this year, so far so good. We had a client yesterday who had an appointment booked for the 3rd of July. For reasons out of their control, they're not going to be ready to go on the 3rd of July. You have the option to go in, cancel and rebook, and they just cancelled, rebooked, and got it for the 10th. So at the moment, let's see how August is. At the moment, it's all positive on that front, albeit that the Spanish government have essentially subcontracted BLS for the appointments. The availability seems a lot better.
Well, that's good. I had an argument with somebody on Facebook, as usual. That's where the arguments happen. About, he was saying basically, the way it's going, the Brits are leaving in their droves. That's from some tabloid headline, and he said by next year there'll be none of them left. And I'm saying, well, look, there's over 300,000 here, and if you look at the embassies, it's obvious that it's difficult to get appointments. Everybody's still going for non-lucrative visas. So I don't think there's going to be any shortage. And if you have a look at the official statistics, the numbers have gone up by, you know, thousands, even tens of thousands every year. So there's more Brits arriving.
Oh yeah. So he was making reference to them leaving Spain, you mean?
Yeah, he was saying that so many people are leaving Spain, and he said, I haven't seen anybody who's got a non-lucrative visa since Brexit. And I was saying, well, that's not my experience of what's happening.
That's rubbish. We've done over 300, so and we're a very small company. So I'm sure there's other companies out there who do an awful lot. And if you look at the stat, that's rubbish. What's happening is, and I don't get involved in Facebook spats because I don't, and I'm not on that many groups, to be honest.
Yeah, good for you.
I imagine my clients saw me getting into arguments on Facebook. They think, well, what's he doing that? He should be working. No, I don't get involved. But yeah, no. I mean, what's happened is before Brexit, residency used to be a sell. You used to have to tell somebody, you actually have to do it. And they'd be, I'm thinking about it, and he said, no, actually, albeit that you're European, if you intend to stay more than 90 days, then you still have to go and register. And there'd be a lot of people who are like, well, I'm only staying for months. And, so a lot of what we call swallows and transient people who never actually registered for residency. Now, evidently, that's all ended. So, people are coming over still with visas, in their various shapes and forms, non-lucrative being, the most popular by far. I think the difference is that, is that everybody's coming over is doing a lot more planning, a lot more conscientious about, the future and how they go about it. Because before Brexit, being EU was allowed that flexibility not to be that conscientious, really.
Brilliant. So, was there something you wanted to tell us about S1 certificates that happened this week?
Yes. So, for those of you who are going, we know the S1 now can be used for a visa application. You have to first go through this crazy rigmarole of registering the S1, albeit that you won't actually get registered until you've got your visa in your hand. You're in Spain. So the process actually is you do a registration, you get a document, which we do it for our clients, or if you're doing your visa yourself, you can go on a Spanish website and do it. And that proves that you've registered your S1 with Social Security. Social Security receive it and go, you're missing lots of documents, come back to us when you've got them. But that registration is sufficient for the consulate to prove you started the process. Now, we were having quite a lot of problems with the S1 because they weren't coming. They're taking a long time to come. Sometimes they mistakenly post them to Spain when they will post them to the UK. But this week we've seen that they've started. It was actually last week I heard about it, and this week I've seen it and had a go on it myself on the platform, the HMRC platform. They've actually sending them via email. So what happens is you make your phone call. It's always best, I think, to make a phone call to the pensions authorities to start the process, and then now send you an email with a link and a code, and basically you go in and you go to your platform, you can download your S1. So, which is really good because you get it in 24 hours. For us, for our clients, it means we can start the registration process, and then they stick an original copy in the post to you.
Brilliant. That's an improvement. Good.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Hello to Janet and JP. That's Jeremy. He's in Palma. Great show, he says. Thank you. Greg is saying, we have bought a house in Spain. We're looking at spending long periods of time there in the near future. We have savings, but would be looking to be able to work. Easiest way to do this, please. Well, we'll be talking today about the main reasons for rejections, so that this will help you to work out the best way of doing it, I hope. So if you've got any particular questions, then ask on the way through, Greg. And hello, Andy D. I'll come to you in a minute. So let's go through what are the main reasons for rejections.
So we've had, obviously any sort of mistake in any application could, the first thing before talking about rejections is the norm. The norm is if there is something that is missing or something that they feel they require, the norm would be that you would get a requirement letter. Okay, so that's sort of the first stage before absolute rejection. Yeah. So it happens on all platforms. So it happens if you're getting a non-lucrative visa and they feel that they're missing a document. As like I said earlier on, the consulate got hold of a couple of clients this week, and it turns out the document's already been handed in. They just had to look in a different file. Sometimes what's happened, we had a client 2 weeks ago who didn't take their S1 registration with them. And there and then they got a requirement letter, sent it to us, and then we sent that registration directly to the consulate. Okay, so the norm is that you will, if there is something that's slightly wrong or something that's slightly missing, then they'll give you this requirement letter. Okay, yep. which is good. Now, in terms of rejections, so far, the biggest scandal this year was the Manchester consulate who rejected medical certificates that were issued in Spain. Now, we used these certificates, we used 183 of them before they decided that they weren't valid. And their reason for not being valid was because the certificates were done via a Zoom call. platform or on a questionnaire platform, and the doctors were issuing them and sending them to the clients, which was fine. They're allowed to do so. Also, in Spanish medical law, as the doctor who did our certificates pointed out, it's actually suggested that it's better not to have a personal appointment after COVID. Anything that can be done via telephone or Zoom is better. But Manchester took a bee in their bonnet to reject any certificate that didn't match up with the entry and exit stamps to Spain, i.e. the person wasn't physically in Spain when they got the certificate. And it happened, I think it was around the 14th of March, they just rejected just across the board. I mean, we had, I think, 7, and then on Facebook just went wild with it as well. So now that's one of the big things is for medical certificates. Now the good news is with those rejections, we wrote appeals. The appeals included updated certificates, which if people had come to Spain were relevant to the passport stamps and full copies of passports, appeal letters, etc. And if people in the UK, new certificates from the UK, and we're already starting to get the approvals back now. But it's taken 2.5 months so far. So, that's good news. But that was a change in criteria by one consulate, because the other consulates have been fine with them so far.
Okay.
And an example of how you can't always predict how they're going to change their criteria either overnight.
Yeah. Oh, we've got a question from Andy D, actually. This is another reason you might get rejected. He's just deregistered himself from self-employment for his non-lucrative visa application. Do I have to have my letter from the tax in the UK notarized saying I've done this, or will a letter from them be good enough?
A letter from them is good enough. So what we've seen in this instance, so yeah, again, talking about just going back to the medical certificates before we finish here, just remember that if you do get a medical certificate from the UK, it has to have a legitimate translation by a proper translator, registered translator, and an apostille. The certificates in Spain don't, but they have to match up with your passport entry and exit stamp.
Okay. Is that a common problem if they're not translated or apostilled?
Yeah, I mean, look, it shouldn't be a cause for rejection. It should be a cause for requirement. So if we say rejection requirement, but obviously when you get a requirement letter, they only give you 10 business days to turn around whatever they're asking for. So when you're talking about apostilles and translations, and we're coming up to the summer period where people are going on holiday, then it could be tough to turn that around. So it's always good to try and get it right, evidently first time. And then sorry, I interrupted you then. What was that question? I forgot.
I think you answered it. Is a letter enough from HMRC?
So yeah, the letter's enough. Yeah, that's fine. Now, if
there you go, I'll bring it back up again.
the letter's fine. So what they state is that you need to have, if you're terminating employment, you need to have P45. Now, in the past, certain consulates have allowed letters from employees, but we confirmed earlier this month that's just not now happening at all. We got that in writing from Edinburgh because there's a little bit grey area whether they'd accept it or not. Just said no, we need a P45.
Yeah.
For state pensioners, if you got your state pension letter, and obviously you may be accompanying that with an S1. Not all people want to use an S1. Some people still go for private. And then for people who are self-employed, if you use an accountant and your accountant has actually signed you off of self-employment, it's also a good idea to take a letter, obviously a letter-headed letter from your accountant stating the date that they signed you off from self-employment, and back that up with official proof from HMRC.
Does that need to be translated and apostilled?
No, not at the moment. No, they're not requesting the translations of those at the moment. So that's good. That's fine. Nor are they requesting translations of P45s or HMRC letters.
Great stuff. There you go. Hope that covers everything you need to know, Andy. And so we've talked about the medical certificate. We've talked about the difference between a rejection and a requirement letter. Anything else to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, the requirement letters, and sometimes the requirement letters are very, very very short, and you can't really fully understand what they say. You know, they'll just, you know, they can be confusing. Now, the one thing that has happened over the last 2 or 3 months, which, you know, it's like this, you know, it's worse than Bitcoin, but is the email. The consulates seem to be responding to individuals quite well via email. Okay, so that's good. That's good news. You know, they don't really respond to companies anymore. I think that comes after the first year, when there was all those problems with the appointments and people were just hammering them every day with, "I want an appointment for my client." So they sort of don't speak to professionals. But people who email, they do seem to be responding within a few days. So if you do get a requirement letter, the best, and you don't understand it, and you've not got anybody guiding you, the best thing is just to email back and ask them for more.
Excellent. Good. What's the difference? You asked me to ask this question, and I don't know what this is. What's the difference between estimar and desestimar? Is that?
Yeah, desestimar and estimar. So when you get your approval through, say you've gone through, you've had a rejection, and you've gone through the process of submitting an appeal, then what they normally do is they send you a letter which accompanies your visa. So we had one this week where a client of ours actually had an appeal in, and we hadn't heard anything, and she decided to go to the consulate and ask if there'd been any updates, and they just said, unfortunately, so just that pile. They actually said, "Let's see that pile over there, and that lady there, she's making the decisions. Yours is in that pile somewhere." But she took a self-addressed envelope with her and decided to leave the passport with them anyway. And they said, "Look, we'll return it one way or another." A week later, she received the passport, and luckily, it had the visa in it, so the appeal was overturned, which was nice, because you do worry. And the letter, when you get your initial letter that says you've been rejected, it says on it desestimar, which means it's basically de-estimated, shall we say. Your application has been rejected. It's desestimar. Now, when you get your approval letter, you'll get the visa in your passport, and you'll get a letter that says estimar, which means it's now been estimated that we're going to give you the visa. So
okay,
it can be quite confusing when you get passport with a visa in it, and this really official looking letter that says estimar, which is so similar to your rejection. That's why I sort of pulled it up.
And is that absolutely definite then, when you get the estimar? Because that sounds like they're estimating, they're guessing that it's going to be okay.
That's definite. Yeah, it's a really bad translation. It's rejected or approved, basically.
Good to know. So, tell you what, you've got to go tight on 11 today, so we're getting on for halfway through the show. So let's have. Oh, don't forget, we've got the special announcement for everybody later on. I'll wait till Chris is gone to do that, and after we've answered all your questions at the end. But before we move on, let's take a short break to have our usual quick message from me and my 3 alter egos about the wonderful things available to you as YouTooSpain fans. So take it away, Skatz. Are you getting something helpful from this show? Are you enjoying YouTooSpain? Then click on the thumbs up and subscribe to YouTooSpain while you're here. And click on the bell for notifications. It's all free, but it's worth loads of money. I need coffee to keep my picker up. You can donate coffee to us all. There's a link in the video description below, or use the QR code. It'll be in the top left-hand corner of the screen after this message, sweetie. But that's not all. You can support YouTooSpain with a regular monthly amount. It's only a few quid. Oh, he's worth a lot more than that. There's a link below to Patreon, where you can find out what extra groovy things you get by helping out. Oh, I'm all a quiver. One more thing. Get on with it. There's an important guest twiddling their thumbs. All right, calm down. The lovely video watcher needs this. Go on then. There are lots of other links to vital things below. Like what? Well, Do you need private healthcare insurance?
Yes.
Do you need a visa or residency?
Do you need to exchange currency? What about finding a property?
Or getting tax and pensions advice? Or getting a Spanish mortgage? Or getting documents translated and apostilled?
Or getting a medical certificate?
Or finding a lovely little app for learning Spanish? Do you need the best mobile phone provider? Or a digital business card so you never need paper ones again?
Or do you just want one of YouTooSpain's t-shirts with a slogan on it?
You can even get discounts on dental treatments and get a lovely little smile like Skatz. All of those links are there
down below.
If you can't find them, ask me in the comments. Is that everything, darling? I need to get my nails done. Probably not. But let's get back to the show, shall we? Back to Skatz in the studio.
I wanted to say that.
Oh, stop being beastly, you two.
YouTooSpain.
Over to you, Skatz. Thank you, Skatz, and Walter and Tommy and Dick for joining us. If anyone has any questions for any of them, ask in the comments below on YouTube, and maybe they'll make a little video just to speak to you. So we've got a question from JP saying, how many times, oh, here we go. How many times do we need to repeat residency years before we can apply for permanent residency, please?
On the NLB, it's, I mean, obviously there's lots of different platforms for residency, but on the NLB, you renew after 12 months. And you renew for a further 24 months, and then at the end of that 24-month period, you then renew for a further 24 months, and then after the 5 years, you can go to your larga duración residence.
Yes, so that's year 1, then it's years 2 and 3, then years 4 and 5. There you go.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Then ask away, JP. We're going to do actually the subject of next week's show is going to be the basics, so it'll go through all of the basics that you need, especially for the non-lucrative visa, and we'll talk more about that later. Anyway, so let's continue. Oh, Rob Walker says, nice teeth, Skatz. Thank you very much. And I think if I can put it together in time, this week's midweek video is going to be the interview with the dentist, because I was there last week and spoke to him and did the interview. And you'll be able to find out how much it costs for all of this to get yourself a complete new set of teeth. So there we go. Right, so back to the questions. What other reasons are there for rejections? Criminal records, was that one of them?
Yes, so criminal records is a big one. We actually just wrote an article on that. I'll give that article a plug on our website.
Yeah.
So read that. Yes, so if you've got an ACRO criminal records check, so, well, let's just explain. With the criminal records, you have to present criminal records from where you have lived in the last 5 years for more than 6 months. So if you've only lived in the UK for the past 5 years, you only need to present an ACRO criminal records check. If you've lived elsewhere, so we've had cases where people lived in Australia, people have lived in Abu Dhabi and places like that. Before they've gone back to the UK, maybe for 2 years, now want to move to Spain, where you also have to present your criminal records check from those countries, which can be a pain. If it's a country who is a signatory to the Hague Agreement, then that criminal record check has to be positioned the same way as an ACRO with its apostille and evidently its translation. Again, the translation has to be in Spanish. So if it's in a country where it's quite hard to find a registered translator, depending on the language you're translating it from, that's also, you know, something that needs to be taken into account. And if it isn't a signatory, if the country isn't a signatory of the Hague Agreement, then it has to be basically stamped by the local Spanish embassy, legalized by them. So that's just something to remember. If you're going to your appointment and you have lived elsewhere in the previous 5 years before your appointment, but you're applying through the UK, for example, then you're going to need to take that extra. That could be a cause for a rejection, or it could be a cause for a requirement letter, but then you've only got 10 working days to turn that around. Right, now we had one of these, and off the top of my head now, I can't remember where it was for. I would look at my computer and I'll find out now. But anyway, it was a country, there was no way we were going to get it in 10 days. We approached London, and London turned around and said, don't worry about it, we'll give you a few more. Nice. And they did. Nice. And they honoured it, and he got his visa. So if you do get that dreaded you got 10 days to do it and you can't turn it around, again, honesty is the best policy. Go back to them and go, I'm really sorry, we can't turn it around because of X, Y, Z. This is when we expect to have it. You know, they're not monsters in that respect so far.
Yeah. Good, that's good to know. What's the difference? You get a letter with no trace or no live trace on it. What's the difference between those two from ACRO?
So with the ACRO, no trace means you've got no previous criminal records detected. No live trace means you have got criminal records which have been stepped down, okay, and no longer figure on the ACRO. Now, so far, as of yesterday, the last 3 years we've been doing ACRO, NLVs, no trace and no live trace have been fine. Okay, so as long as your ACRO criminal record checks, there's no trace or no live trace, then that's fine for a visa. Okay, what there is a common myth that if you've got an offence and it is over 5 years old, then that's fine as well. It's not. We've seen it in the past where people have had offences on there and they've been old, in some cases over 30 years old, and it's been a cause for rejection of the visa application. So it has to say no trace or no live trace.
Excellent, that's good to know. I'll make a note of that. We're going to put that on my website as well.
Yeah, and I mean, there is cause for. We've had a few clients who have had certain things which have shown up. One, for example, was what they called an administrative offence. So it was something to do with running a company, or it didn't rob a bank or anything like that. And that was due to be stepped down because they do step down after 5 years. So we had to wait a certain amount of time. That then we initially did a check. I said, look, if you think it's going to show, just get one. It's worth the 50 quid to check. You know, it's a waste, but in the grand scale of things, it's not. It did show. They emailed ACRO to say, how do we get it stepped down? They said you have to wait until X date, then apply to get it stepped down. They did. So you can email ACRO and actually ask them to step it down. And if you fall into that qualification criteria, they will do. Then pay for a new certificate, and it did come back with no live trace on it, and we were able to use that to get the visa.
Excellent. Bev's asking the question based on how many years to permanent residency. She's talking about when you don't need a visa. So if one of you is an EU resident, how long to permanent then? Still 5 years, isn't it?
5 years, yeah. So same with Skatz. Well, Liz,
yes.
Liz the same.
Absolutely, yes.
Guys have been on.
And you don't have to renew it during that 5 years. It's just at the end of 5 years.
Yes, it's straight 5 years. Which, this is another thing, we might as well say it is slightly off topic, but on top about what we're talking about. We've had now twice the craziest thing where EU family members who have to make their application before the 90-day period runs out, and then you're allowed to stay within the application period. Okay. Now we've had this on 2 occasions now where the immigration authorities here in Malaga came back and they've asked us for real and effective proof of people living in Spain. Now, if you're staying within the rules, that's actually quite hard, okay? Because you've only been here for 18. If you submit on your 89th day, if you're a conscientious citizen and you're getting your ducks in a row, got all your paperwork ready, and you're submitted it in good time, it's going to be quite possible you haven't got real and effective residence in Spain yet, because they're asking for things like telephone bills, bank account statements, anything, gym membership, anything's related to you that you are actually living in Spain. Now, in the first instance that we got this, they actually took 3 months to respond to the application, which meant, funny enough, the person did have real and effective proof they're in Spain because they'd been here for 6 months at that point. And hadn't left because they're waiting for their visa approval. Sorry, for their residency approval, not visa, residency approval. But in the latest one we got was within 3 days of making the application, and the person had conscientiously judged their time properly, okay, to make the application. The application was a perfect application. They came back and asked us for literally the same what they used to ask for during the withdrawal agreement, say prove that someone actually lives there. So I'll let you know how that goes. We put together everything we possibly could, but with a letter also pointing to the fact that on their requirements, they do state that you have to do it in 90 days. Okay, so Let's see how that goes. So for all your EU family members in Malaga, if you get one of those, it's worth noting the moment you land, just collect all your documents to prove you're actually here living.
Yeah, good to know. So the next possible rejection, not enough money, financial requirement.
Yeah, not enough money, or maybe not proving that you've got enough money. Excuse me, it's been attacked by a wasp.
No.
Joy's doing outside live. Yeah, so if you haven't got enough money, so obviously we've spoken about ePrem, haven't we? And you've got a great video on that as well, which shows what you need. But if you haven't got sufficient proof that you've got enough money, or the money comes from a source which they deem to be lucrative and not non-lucrative, then that could be a cause for rejection. We have seen that before, where initially the application's been accepted, and then they've either come back with a requirement letter, and then once right at the beginning we got an immediate rejection, which actually took a letter rather than extra proof, just to explain what was being presented. Then when they read it and they re-looked at the documents, they then approved the visa. But yeah, I mean, the only advice that we would have on that would be make sure that what you're presenting is quite clear. You know, so if you have a complex structure of passive income, then you'd have to accompany it, I think, with a letter to explain what you're actually presenting.
It's a really good idea to look from the perspective of the official, isn't it? Sometimes some people find that really difficult.
Yeah, no, you have to. You know, you've got to look at from the perspective of somebody who sat behind a desk looking at what you're giving them. You know, imagine you know nothing about your circumstance and you're just receiving your paperwork. How would you see it? So, you know, in respect to that, what we always say is, look, there's no set structure to how they ask you to present your financials. They just tell you how much you need to show. But if you have, for example, a cash asset, maybe it's cash in the bank, you know, that meets the minimum requirement, or is close, or it's a savings, it's a cash asset that you're using as part of your application, and you can prove that, then that's what needs to be at the top of the pile, yeah, because that's a cash asset. After that, if you've got passive income, then it's always good to have what we call like the yearly summary of that passive income. So you'd have P60s or whatever, plus the proof of that passive income being paid into the account, yeah, where it's paid. And then, because that could be either a rental contract from a property that you own, or maybe a P60 from a pension or something like that. So you've got cash assets, passive income, and then anything else after that, which may be what you could call a product. So, you know, maybe you have cash tied up in a pension, which you can get hold of, but not immediately. Maybe you have assets in an investment, maybe you have an ISA, stuff like that, which is wrapped up slightly, but you do have access to the assets to. Well, that could come after that, and always make sure you've got proof of the accessibility of those funds. Yeah, so, you know, even if it's with a penalty, for example, if you've got an investment, they're going to charge you 10% if you pull it now, but you can have it tomorrow. Have that, because they can still see that that's available cash.
Rob's saying, would a large amount of premium bonds count for finances? That's good. Is that instantly accessible? I don't know.
3 days. Yeah, do you know what? If you'd have asked me that question last year, I'd have gone, forget it, cash them in, stick them in the bank, and then, you know, buy premium bonds again if you want to afterwards or whatever. Yeah, premium bonds were frowned on last year by the consulates. So far, the last 6 months, we've had a good experience. Let's see what happens with the BLS. You know, so far, the premium bonds have been accepted. We haven't had that much problems, and we've submitted some for renewals now, and they've been approved both in Alicante and Malaga. And then we had some in Alicante, they just didn't like them at all, so they ended the guys, they obviously have to get submitted with a translation if you're doing a renewal. In the consulates, they don't request a translation at the moment. But there was one instance on a renewal where we just ended up having to cash them in, put in a Spanish bank account, get a Spanish certificate, and they approved it straight away. So it depends. Yeah, so far so good this year, but let's see if they ever change of heart. I mean, look, what is better? It's always better to have that cash asset in a bank account and a stamped statement. That's ideal. If you haven't got that and you want to try with premium bonds, yeah, so far so good. But, you know, if it was me, I'd probably put it in an account.
There you go. Nice one from Charlene McGregor saying, how about Bitcoin? Lol.
I tell you, you're right now. It's just popped up.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. If you want to go to constant, but no. Now Bitcoin's really hard. It's unstable. It's really, really tough to use crypto. In fact, no, don't use crypto at all. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. It's instantly accessible, but it's also instantly losable as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think they'd take that as proof. But you were being funny about it anyway, so that's all right.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Terry Gibson says, would being registered on the Padron be proof that you are living in Spain? Well, absolutely. That's the best proof you can get. There you go. Bev says, how long does it need to be in the bank for?
Oh, great question. And there's a big misconception about that you have to have the money in the bank for 6 months before you go to your appointment. You don't. What you do need to do is you need to have proof of the origin of funds if there's any large movements of money. Now, they seem to focus last year on anything over 10 grand. This year, that's gone down to 5. But essentially, if they see anything in your accounts, movement of money in or out, which they want to ask where it's come from, then they will do. So things like, we had a client who had a house sale go through literally 4 days before the appointment. It was supposed to go through like earlier than that, and we were at that point where we were going to have to hit the cancel rebook, and the money dropped in, and they had a completion statement, an up-to-date bank statement, which showed the money gone in, a completion statement from a lawyer actually signed off. Unfortunately, a lot of lawyers send stuff through via email. Emails aren't that good. If you can get an actual letter from the lawyer to show the completion and the breakdown of the monies paid from a house, that's better. And as long as you've got that, then that's fine. Again, if you're cashing in premium bonds into an account, don't just take the account with, I've just cashed in 50k, but take the premium bond statement as well to say that is where it came from.
Yeah, paper trail. That's what you need.
Yeah.
For whatever you're doing. There you go. Good question. So, is that everything about finances, or we can move on to healthcare?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it about the finances. Unless anybody's got any questions, happy to answer them.
Okay, healthcare. Incorrect or incomplete documentation or not enough coverage. Those are the sort of standard things to watch out for.
Yeah, remember, if you've got healthcare, then you have to have a certificate which basically covers you for the period of the residency. No co-payments, which we know as excess. In Spanish, they call them copagos, which is, it means that when you arrive in Spain, you're going to hit the ground running. And if there'll be no sort of, if you stub your toe on the first day, go to the hospital, they're not going to ask you 50 quid to fix it, basically. So, and also there can be no excess no exclusions. So it's no co-payments, excess, and no exclusions on policy. Now, reading between the lines, probably a lot of people are going to go, well, I've sort of got exclusions, but I haven't. Look, the insurance companies have been very clever on how they position their products for residency lately, and do produce correct documents for the consulate, and there may be very certain terms and conditions on page 562 of the policy. But most insurance companies now actually have specialist residency policies, and the consulates are quite used to seeing them now.
Janet's saying, can you see my question? I can see that question, but if you've asked another question, I can't. No. So ask again. There we go. So anything else with healthcare that gets a refusal?
Yeah, and the other thing is, we had a recent case where don't forget, you have to maintain your healthcare. So even if you get through that first year, you have to maintain. Now, you can switch your healthcare. So, for example, we've had people who have come in on a private healthcare platform. Okay, so they've got a private policy. They've kept that policy for a year, and during that year, they've state retired, they've got their S1, we've registered the S1, they've got their certificate to say that the S1 has been accepted in Spain and registered, and we've used that for the renewal. You can do that. Okay. But what you can't do is find yourself without healthcare at any point.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, it's a matter of having the paper trail to prove that.
Yeah, and keep the paper trail, because we've had it in the past where on renewals, they've actually asked us to prove that the person has kept healthcare during the year, which we've got the original certificate and the renewal certificate as well.
Do they do that for the for the permanent residency at the end of the 5 years? Do they make sure you've got all of that? Do they ask for any of those back documents?
No, well, in theory, no. So in theory, your permanent residents, they don't actually ask for the proof of income or healthcare when you switch to the permanent platform. But evidently, you know, it's a good to have it in hand because they can ask for anything they like.
Good stuff. So, anything? So we've covered healthcare. What about incorrect details on the application forms? What is it that people miss off?
Yeah, I mean, so it's things like small things like on the application forms. No, I mean, look, the application forms are extremely complicated, and one of the biggest problems that people have, questions that people ask us, for example, with a national visa application form, they're like, "What on earth do I put in all these boxes?"
Yeah.
And like, well, actually, you don't have to put anything because there's an awful lot of it you don't have to fill in, you know. So that's one thing to say, you know, like, so for our clients, yeah, just plug us now, but we do it for them. So we send them out a pack with it, and then PDFs if needed, but actually print them out, send them out in a folder, all done and dusted. But if you're doing it yourself and you're on the national visa application form, for example, for non-lucrative visas, page 2, 3, and 4, there's hardly anything you need to fill in, and people are trying to fill it in. So maybe a little bit too much could be cause for questions or rejections at the actual appointment. You want to make sure that all your essential details are correct. So things like dates of birth, passports, previous surnames, that's something you have to state, albeit you don't need proof of all those surnames. You do have to state that on the national visa application form. It doesn't have to go on the tax form or the XO1, but it does have to go on the main form. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good idea to make sure you get your forms checked over before you go to your appointment.
Excellent. Janet's question has come up now. She's selling her home to fund the NLV and staying with a friend. Oh, this is a good one. The address that you put on the form. Do I need documents to prove this address, as I'm assuming it's the one I use on the application?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very common circumstance. I've had this week as well. Somebody, yeah, you would now, at the moment, when you're booking your appointment for the consulate, let's go from north to south, shall we? Edinburgh are only asking for you to state on your email when you're requesting an appointment what address you're at, so you don't need proof. Manchester are asking for scans of the ACRO, asking for scans of the medical certificate, and also a photo of you holding your passport and smiling. We'd have to smile, but it's always nice to.
Yeah.
Now, what we've had recently is where we had one client who actually moved halfway through the process. The ACRO had the address on their old address, but the application forms we updated to the new address because they sold the property. It wasn't a problem. Okay. It would be a problem if you're in a different consular district. So if you went from north to south, then you might find that you've got a problem. Now, these clients in particular, they stayed in the same area. In fact, they stayed in two very close to towns, and that was absolutely fine. What you want to make sure is that on your model EX01, the notification address is correct. So if they have to notify you, sometimes they don't do it by email, they send a letter when they feel like it. So, you know, make sure that's 100% correct. And also, one thing to mention is that if you are leaving, for example, an envelope, which you can do for them to return the passport to you in all three consulates, that envelope address doesn't have to match what you use for your application. You can have your passport sent somewhere else. Okay, literally it's just a correspondence. So there is a certain degree of understanding with the consulates that people are sort of setting up in a transitioning period.
And she said, do you need documents to prove this? Did you answer that?
Oh, sorry, no. So Edinburgh, you don't. Manchester, no. As long as you're in the same consular district and the address on the documents you are presenting matches the consular district. And evidently, the good thing about it, Janet, is that you're going to have, you'll have, depending on your timeline, you'll have the ACRO, address at your old address. You sell your property. You're going to have the funds in the bank, proof you sold the property, and if the ACRO has got that address on it, it wouldn't matter because you've got that paper trail to prove it. Now in London, also no. At the moment, now London only asks for a copy of the ACRO criminal records check. Now, if you can use your new address if you're currently living there. You know, so if you've sold your property, you got the money in the bank, definitely use the temporary address. But if you're in that transition period, and we know now the ACROs last for 6 months, and that address has changed from the ACRO to your temporary address, and that's fine because you have that proof with your completion statement, the money in the bank as well.
Excellent. She's in the Manchester area, and she'll be staying in the Manchester area with a friend's address. So
it's as long as you've got the paperwork trail, then you're fine. You know.
That seems to be the answer to quite a lot of these questions. Keep your paperwork trail right. So, out-of-date documents. Yeah, what do you do about that if your application's taken a while?
Yeah, remember the ACRO is also date of creation, not date of print. Okay, so what we've seen with that is that, you know, initially ACRO's date of creation, date of print, they'll vary, and the variation was a day. We've seen them now up to 3 weeks. You know, so that's I got one the other day, which was 3 date of creation, date of print was 3 weeks. You know, which if you get that wrong, you know, that's quite. It was never really an issue before because the dates would be 2 or 3 days apart. So you'd say just go by, you know, go by date of creation because that's the safe side. But you know, if someone was to make a mistake and see that the date of print and go, oh, I've got 180 days it is now from the date of print for ACRO, you get there, like 3 weeks is going to be out of date.
Yes, but you do have that 6 months now, which is 3 months longer than everything else. So it's slightly easier to keep in date with that one.
Yeah, and you've got medical certificates. They're only still valid for 90 days. And if you are taking a duplicate of your marriage certificate, that as well needs to be dated within 90 days. And the other thing is also your financials. Make sure they are as up to date as possible. Now, there's no set sort of timeline for when they go out of date, but you can't take something that's 3 months old. Okay, so if you've got bank account statements, you want to make sure they're a minimum, I would say, of 2 weeks to 10 days old by the time you get there. A maximum.
Yeah, and that can be difficult if you only get your statements every 3 months.
I tell you what, that's true. And what we have been doing quite successfully is because we've had a load of people who can't get what we call original statements, you know, from the bank. They only get them at the end of the month. So but they can get online statements. So as long as you've got your 6 months, so this happens a lot with Spanish accounts, right? Where people are coming to Spain, they've actually got assets in Spain they want to use, they go and get the stamped statements, stamped certificates, but then it's 3 weeks to their appointment. What they've been taking is prints of, they've got the original statements, and then there's that gap. You just explain, you know, you can have it in writing as well, that it matches up with the passport stamp. So you've been to Spain, printed off your bank statements, you've got a passport stamp back into the UK, and you've printed off what you can online at the time of the appointment, which corresponds to the ones that you've got, which are originals. And so far, they seem to be pretty understanding of that.
Excellent. JP says, if I didn't live in the UK for 15 years, do I still need UK ACRO? He was a resident of Ukraine for 15 years.
If you're applying from the UK, then yes, you would still need an ACRO, and it depends how long you've been in the UK. So you have to apply from the country of residence, so wherever you're resident. So at the moment, for example, we've got a lot of Brits who live in France who are having to apply through France. One of which only lived there for 3 years, so they need an ACRO from the UK where they previously lived, and a criminal record from France. So basically the same applies for everybody.
Excellent. Thanks for that question, JP. So we've done out-of-date documents. I think you answered this one earlier. How much time do you have to correct rejections? Is that 10 working days?
Yeah, so it's 10 working days to correct. To correct a requirement. So a rejection, you have 30 days to appeal. Okay, so let's have a look at the difference between a requirement and a rejection. So on a requirement, you have 10 working days to basically submit the documents that they're requesting. On rejection, it's completely different. You have to submit an appeal explaining why you don't agree with the rejection and presenting any sort of documentary proof which would help towards you getting an approved. That has to be done within 30 days of receiving the rejection letter. They actually say 30 days from the day after receiving the rejection letter, and that's 30 natural days, not 30 business days. You have 60 days to put it to the tribunal court in Madrid if you want to. That would involve getting a legal aid or a lawyer and doing it that way. So there's two ways to appeal. You can either do it contencioso, which is actually administrative appeal with the same organisation and saying, look, this is why we don't agree, or you can go above their heads. You've got 60 days and take it to court.
Good to know. What's the difference between just appealing or reapplying? Should you just reapply?
No, so I mean, initially it's always best to, should we say, fight the initial application. Okay, so then if that application gets rejected again, so if you have an appeal in process, it's always best to go for your contencioso appeal, the administrative appeal first. If that then gets rejected, then you can apply again. But it's always best to fight the first case.
Good to know. Janet's asking, how soon after the appointment do people generally get sent requirement letters?
Oh, we've seen them 90 days after. We've seen them the day after, and it almost, we had an email, but an email requirement the other day, which came nearly less than 24 hours after. So unfortunately, there's not. If I was to say an average, I'd say it's 10 days to 2 weeks that you would normally get asked for something else.
Good to know. That's all of the questions I've got on here, which is perfect because we're 4 minutes to 11. That's perfect for you, isn't it? If you've got any more questions on the chat, then do it very, very quickly. There's a 20-second delay here until the questions come up. So in the meantime, if you miss out today on the live chat and you've got any questions, then after the show is over, put them in the comments below on YouTube on our channel, not back on the Facebook page where you found the link to this channel, because that'll disappear off and nobody will get the information. There'll only be me and you reading that. And don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell if you haven't already, so you'll be the first to know what's coming each week on the live shows and the midweek videos. Thomas has a question. Why don't they tell you at the time of appointment about requirements?
Yeah, good question there, Thomas. Now, sometimes they do, so sometimes the person the person who initially gets your application is basically just doing a tick box exercise. As long as they tick their boxes, they don't look too deep into it. That then will be reviewed by someone else. But yeah, at times what happens is during that tick box exercise, they'll turn around and go, actually, you're not ticking this box and you need to do this. Okay, and then you will find out there and then. But yeah, a lot of the times it comes afterwards, so especially more on the financials front. Yeah, so what you might find is that someone goes in with a bank account which has, the minimum required amount there, for example. So we recently had one where somebody went in, there was about £35,000 in the account. It was a single application, so it evidently qualified. There was a 6-month statement. They said, yeah, fine. Appointment went well. Got a letter from London saying you can follow your visa application using this code. 2 weeks later, we got a letter saying, can you please justify the origin of XYZ, which we did, and it was fine. But that initial administrative member of staff didn't pick up on the movement of money or ask or anything.
Yeah, there you go. Janet's thinking about spending some waiting time in Spain while waiting for the visa. Might make it more difficult, she says. What are the problems with that?
Problems which consulate you use. So London, you can't, because they retain your passport at the moment. Edinburgh is sort of 50-50. Depends on whether they feel like it or not. So, but with Edinburgh, you have to assume they're going to retain your passport. All right, and if you're one of the lucky ones that manage to get it back, then that's fine. But we always say you have to just assume and make your plan surrounding the fact that they're going to take your passport, maybe. They seem to be a lot bit unpredictable up there. Manchester quite happily give you your passport back at the moment. Who knows what will happen Monday?
Yeah, So have you got to be that, if you happen to be hanging out in Spain and something comes in that you don't see, is it going to give you less time to respond to it? Maybe that could be one
Yeah,
of the
sure. So, I
problems.
mean, look, yeah, I mean, if obviously you could have a UK correspondence address to make sure you receive any letters, make sure that's regularly checked. If you're hanging out in Spain enjoying your 90 days, so make sure you've got access to your email as well, because they sometimes use that platform as well. So yeah, and also you can't get your visa issued in Spain, so you have to go back to the UK, and they give you 30 days to do so once your visa is approved.
Yeah. Thomas is saying, do you mean the origin of the 35,000, the financial requirement? Surely this is not their concern.
It was actually, in this instance, it was the origin of a different transfer which arrived in there.
Oh, your sign's falling down. News update, Upsticks has collapsed. That's all right, there's a bit of a breeze there, isn't it?
At least it wasn't the cat this time. The cat's still asleep here. Not bothered me today. Yeah, so no, it's so when we talk about the origins of funds, if you've been saving for like 20 years to get your 35k, they're not going to say when did you start saving and putting €1 in your account every week to save it in LV. No, it's in the last 6 months, if you've got any large movements of money in or out of your account, then they will probably, they're going to want to know the origins of those funds. The reason they do this is to stop, for example, people lending people money to get a visa and then wanting that money back, for example. Yeah. Now, that's not to say you can't lend somebody money for a visa, but you can't. But you can give somebody money. But we've had an instance where the parent gave a daughter money for the visa, and they had to go to a public notary and sign on the dotted line. They will never ask for that money back.
Mm-hmm. Good to know. Rob says, do you have to prove where you will live in Spain with your application?
Yeah, another good question. Now, if you have got a rental or a property in Spain, it's always good to take that proof with you. But essentially, no. If you evidently, a lot of people haven't had the chance to arrange permanent accommodation because they've never been in Spain. So for Malaga applicants, we quite often use our office address and then update it once they're here. Obviously, then we explain that it's a correspondence address rather than a permanent address.
Brilliant. So that's the final question for today. As I say, if you have any more, put them in the comments below in the video description. So it's after 11, Chris. You've got to go and not give golf lessons. I was going to say take your kids to their golf lessons.
I'm going to Portugal on a holiday for 4 days.
Oh, yeah, it's the holiday, right? Of course you are. Yeah. So enjoy that.
6-hour drive now.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So I will see you next week, and I'll tell everybody after you've gone today exactly what that is going to be all about. So thank you so much again for your time and efforts, and for your brilliance and loveliness. And so everybody give Chris a big virtual hug and a wave. Bye for now. Ta-ta. There we go. So Thomas says, what about the money from the sale of your house? Will this come in for CGT? Yeah, capital gains tax. That's a very good question. If you watch the tax video, actually, that we did, Thomas, you'll get a more expansive answer to this. But basically, the CGT idea is that if you sell your property in the UK, let's give an example. If you sell it now, in June, in the UK, if you sold it today and you moved in the second half of the year, then you should be safe and you shouldn't have to pay capital gains tax in Spain. Because if you move in the second half of the year, then you won't be spending more than 6 months. 183 days is the rule. You won't be spending more than that, so you won't become a tax resident until 2024. And the same goes for if you sell your house, in the second half of the year, but you move in the second half of the year or in the following year. So basically, it's all about the amount of time that you spend in Spain. And be careful if you've spent 3 months in Spain already in the year, that counts towards the 183 days. Some people say it doesn't, but I think it does. I'm not an expert. I'm not a tax expert. Hope that answers your question. And but don't go away yet, because what's happening next week, I did put a little announcement on Facebook about this. And yeah, here's a little hint. I showed you this earlier. I've got an extra camera set up and I'm doing this. Actually, let's have a quick look behind the scenes. These are my lights, and this just shows you how big the space is that I'm working in here. That's my green screen, great big green screen, and that's why you get lots of different pictures from behind me in all of the different videos. And if you look over there, actually, if you see, where am I pointing now? That's Walter's hat and Walter's costume underneath it, and further along that's Tommy's shirt, and that is Dick's pink shirt. There you go. So that is where they all live, so I can grab them very quickly. There's my piano over there, which isn't working very well at the moment because there's an earth buzz. I'll tell you about that on another occasion, because there's some gigs that I'm doing coming up, and there's my guitar there. So yeah, just to show you, it's a very cluttered little room, lovely wooden roof, and that's me in my chair. And the reason I'm showing you this in particular is because next week's show we're going to have some TV cameras. And I don't think there's room in this little space. These TV cameras are from the programme Bargain Brits in the Sun. And they've asked to film me while I'm doing the show, and also while I'm doing a gig in the evening, and anything else that happens in between. So I'm going to have this camera, which is just my phone, and also my laptop, because I'm not going to do the show in here. Because we won't be able to fit the TV cameras in the space. So I'm going to do it actually in the garden. So I won't be around a virtual pool anymore. I won't have a stock photograph on a green screen behind me. There is going to be the real garden of me, the real garden of me, my real garden, yes. And you'll see the swimming pool and the whole thing. And but I'll actually be facing it, so I'll have a wall behind me. So I've got this thing set up as a virtual camera, so I can point it all around the place. I wonder what happens if I point it at the screen like that. That looks odd. There you go. I'll be learning how to do that during the week. And Chris will be there with me, actually side by side in the garden. He's not going to be on a separate little box on the screen. He's going to be right next to me. He's coming over to Computer to be all part of the action, and so he'll get his face on there, and I'll show you all of the TV cameras as they're doing that. And we will be talking about, let me get back to my other camera there. There we go. And yeah, so we will be talking about, let's find out what the title of the show is. I had this worked out beforehand. We're going to call it Bargain Brits special. Moving to Spain, myths exposed. Yes, another exciting title. I'm going for the big impact. It's going to be. I was talking to a couple of people at my gig last night, and they were saying, "Oh, it's really, really difficult to get the non-lucrative visa, and it was this amount of money, and you need a solicitor, and this is how much it costs, and all kinds of things." And there was a lot of misinformation, and fortunately they had me there to give them the benefit of what little knowledge I have about all of this. But it just shows you that a lot of people who are here as British citizens on the 9180, and they've got houses here, they don't necessarily know even the basics about the non-lucrative visa. And that is very interesting. So I thought we'll do a basic show, and we'll get rid of some of those myths that are obviously about. So that's next week's show. I think that's everything for the show. You've asked all of your questions, and thank you to all of you on the live chat. Rob, Andy, Janet, Thomas, Bev, Janet again, JP, and everybody else that got their name. Charlene for that little joke about Bitcoin. Thank you. Terry Gibson. And Andy D, Greg Cotfield. And is that everybody? Yes, it is. Thank you so much for watching the show. Don't forget to watch the midweek video, which I think, if I can get that video out in time, is going to be all about getting my teeth done, how much it cost. You'll actually get to meet the real dentist, Felix. Yes, who created these for me and went through the process with me. He's a lovely bloke, and you'll get to find out all about that. So that's it for this week. Peace and love to everybody. Peas and fluff. Don't forget, it depends. Everything depends on everything else. I might have the t-shirts by this week. In fact, there's a parcel at the post office. I'm going to have a look at that now. Don't forget the merchandise stuff. You can get Let's Dance on mugs. You can get Let's Dance on hoodies. You can get Peas and Fluff. You can get, Let's Dance. Oh, there's Peas and Fluff. You can get it on the arms as well. Yeah, lots of stuff there. You can get, it's a win-win-win with the cherry on top. Loads more of those. So that's it. Thanks for watching. And get ready to dance. Here's the theme song. Bye-bye for now.
Bye, lads. Bye. Goodbye. Toodaloo. Peace and love. Peas and fluff. Oi, oi. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. One more cosmic dance? All right, then. Look, Mum, I'm dancing. Oh, I'm all a quiver. Let's dance.